China thought it had it all figured out. With its booming economy and vast resources, it seemed like the perfect time to expand its influence. The strategy was simple: use its financial muscle to win friends and allies across the globe. And what better place to start than the Philippines, a country in need of infrastructure and investment? Shower the Philippines with money, right? The plan was to inject billions into the local economy, funding everything from roads to ports and even a state-of-the-art stadium. The idea was that these grand gestures would win over the hearts and minds of the Filipino people and their leaders, build them some roads, some ports, maybe even a fancy new stadium. The construction projects were massive and ambitious, promising to transform the landscape of the Philippines and bring about a new era of prosperity. Chinese companies were brought in to handle the projects, ensuring that the quality and speed of construction met the highest standards. Everyone loves a sugar daddy, right? Well, not so fast. While the initial reaction was one of excitement and gratitude, it didn't take long for skepticism to set in. The Filipino people began to question the true motives behind China's generosity. Was this really about helping the Philippines, or was it more about expanding China's own influence and control? China forgot one tiny detail: respect. In their rush to win over the Philippines with money and infrastructure, they overlooked the importance of cultural sensitivity and mutual respect. The Filipino people have a strong sense of national pride and a deep-rooted history of resisting foreign influence. Simply throwing money at them wasn't going to be enough. Turns out you can't just buy loyalty with cheap concrete when you're also throwing your weight around in someone else's backyard. Oops! China's aggressive actions in the South China Sea, where it has been building artificial islands and asserting its territorial claims, only served to heighten tensions. The Philippines, feeling threatened and disrespected, began to push back against China's advances. This is the story of how China's billion-dollar bet on the Philippines went spectacularly wrong. Despite the massive investments and grand promises, the relationship between the two countries has become strained and contentious. The lesson here is clear: money can buy many things, but it can't buy respect or loyalty. And without those, even the most well-funded plans are doomed to fail. For years, China has been on a spending spree in the Philippines. This wasn't just a casual investment. It was a calculated move to gain a foothold in Southeast Asia. The Philippines, with its strategic location and growing economy, was the perfect target for China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative. The Chinese government saw an opportunity to extend its influence and secure its interests in the region. We're talking billions upon billions of dollars poured into infrastructure projects. These weren't small-scale endeavors, they were massive undertakings designed to transform the Philippine landscape. From highways that stretched for miles to state-of-the-art airports, the scale of investment was staggering. The financial commitment was unprecedented, and it seemed like there was no end in sight. Roads, bridges, railways, you name it, China was building it. The construction boom was visible everywhere, from bustling cities to remote provinces. New infrastructure promised to boost the local economy, create jobs, and improve connectivity. The vision was grand, and the execution was swift. Chinese companies, backed by their government, were at the forefront of this transformation. And let's not forget the loans, oh so many loans, offered with a smile and a promise of everlasting friendship. These loans came with attractive terms, making them hard to resist. Filipino officials were eager to sign agreements, believing that this partnership would bring prosperity and development. The ceremonies were grand, the promises were lofty, and the future seemed bright. China was playing the long game, weaving a web of influence they thought would last a lifetime. They thought wrong. As the projects progressed, cracks began to show. The loans, once seen as generous, started to look like traps. The terms were not as favorable as they initially appeared, and the debt began to mount. The promised benefits were slow to materialize, and the Filipino people started to question the true cost of this partnership. The web of influence was not as unbreakable as China had hoped. Remember that respect thing we talked about? It's a fundamental aspect of any relationship, whether personal or between nations. Respect builds trust, fosters cooperation, and ensures mutual growth. But what happens when one side decides to ignore this crucial element? Yeah, China kind of skipped that memo. Instead of nurturing the budding friendship with the Philippines, China chose a path of dominance and intimidation. Their military presence in the region grew stronger, and their actions became more aggressive. While showering the Philippines with gifts, China was also busy flexing its muscles in the West Philippine Sea, building artificial islands, harassing Filipino fishermen, and asserting their control over disputed waters. These actions were a stark contrast to the friendly gestures they were making on the surface, ignoring international law, not exactly the actions of a trustworthy friend. The Philippines, a nation that values its sovereignty and the rule of law, found itself in a precarious position. The international community watched as China blatantly disregarded legal norms and treaties. The Filipino people had enough. Protests erupted, politicians started pushing back, and the media began to highlight the discrepancies between China's promises and its actions. The streets of Manila and other major cities were filled with voices demanding justice and respect. And suddenly those shiny new Chinese projects didn't look so appealing anymore. The infrastructure that was supposed to symbolize progress and partnership now stood as a reminder of broken promises and unfulfilled commitments. The once welcomed investments were now seen as tools of influence and control. The situation called for a re-evaluation of priorities. The Philippines began to strengthen its alliances with other nations, seeking support and solidarity. Local communities rallied together, emphasizing the importance of self-reliance and resilience. Diplomatic discussions were initiated to address the growing concerns and to find a peaceful resolution to the conflicts. The legal battle continued on the international stage. The Philippines took its case to international courts, seeking justice and a reaffirmation of its rights. The world watched closely, as the outcome of this dispute would set a precedent for future maritime conflicts. Despite the challenges, the spirit of the Filipino people remained unbroken. Cultural celebrations, community resilience, and rebuilding efforts showcased their determination to overcome adversity. The journey was far from over, but the lessons learned would shape the future of the nation. Remember all those sweet deals China was offering? Well, turns out there were strings attached, lots of them. As China's aggression in the West Philippine Sea escalated, the Philippines started saying no thanks to those generous offers. Projects were put on hold, contracts were ripped up, and billions of dollars of Chinese investment went up in smoke. Whoops. So who are the Philippines turning to now that China's shown its true colors? Well, old friends are the best friends, or so they say. The United States is back in a big way, strengthening military ties and promising to help the Philippines defend its territory. And they're not alone. Japan, Australia, even the European Union, everyone wants to be best friends with the Philippines now. Too little, too late for China? China's scrambling to salvage the situation, but the damage is done. They're sending out diplomats with promises of peace and cooperation. They're trying to win back hearts and minds with sweet talk and vague assurances. But it's hard to rebuild trust when you've already burned down the house. Section 7. A lesson learned: the future of influence in Asia. China's miscalculation in the Philippines is a cautionary tale. You can't bully your way into someone's good graces. As China continues its rise to power, it needs to learn that respect and cooperation, not coercion and aggression, are the keys to lasting influence. The world is watching and they're taking notes. Stay informed. The story isn't over yet. This is just the beginning of a complex and evolving story. The relationship between China and the Philippines, and indeed the entire geopolitical landscape of Southeast Asia, is in flux. Stay informed, stay engaged, and stay tuned for more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below.